Hello, welcome to Labor and Work podcast from the KMC Center at Auckland University in Michigan. I'm your host, Sufeng Zhuang, Director of the KMC Center and Associate Professor of Organizational Leadership Department at Auckland University. Thank you for joining us. Each episode, we chat with industry professionals to share insight, trends, and actionable strategies to promote positive labor relations in an era of rapid social change. In this episode, we are going to focus on building inclusive talent strategies based on current and future job needs. I'm excited to have Sarah Gregory with us today. Sarah is the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Talent Solutions for the Detroit Regional Partnership. She oversees programming that provides comprehensive workforce data and customized talent planning and collaborates with business leaders to align talent strategies with industry needs and leverage partnerships across universities, community colleges, and workforce agencies to connect residents with career opportunities. She also works with state policy leaders to better understand and support economic development activities in Southeast Michigan. Welcome, Sarah. It's great to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
The rapid progression of advanced technologies, particularly machine learning and AI, has influenced the global workforce President speed as the U.S. government is actively pursuing policies and investment in workforce development for high-tech manufacturing transformation. Be able to develop inclusive talent strategies based on current and future job needs is crucial. I remember the first time we met, which was a little over a year ago, you mentioned how employers are having a hard time finding qualified workers and how organizations should recognize employees' experience rather than just education degree, which I found very interesting. And that makes me wonder if the traditional talent recruitment and development strategies have become like old school because of technology-induced work and labor market change. And how do we develop new school talent development strategies? So when I think about this, I know I need you to be our guest of this podcast. And again, I appreciate you're willing to share your perspective insight with us. So let's begin with a question that maybe just to first clarify what we are facing today. So what are the current issue and challenges of talent development, particularly in Michigan?
Yeah. I think for Michigan and for, as you were just talking about, the United States and around the world, we're experiencing just a really rapid pace of technology that is changing how we work and how people go to work and how people show up for work. And due to that, I think our employers are really struggling with timing and then risk. And so they want to invest in these future technologies and in training that will ensure that their talent can be effective long term and into the future, but they can't invest in that training until those jobs actually exist. But the talent pipelines, we need to make sure that people are prepared to be taking these jobs of the future as well. So it puts us kind of in this chicken and egg situation. We need to be prepared for these future jobs, and we need to ensure that our schools and our colleges and our training programs are teaching those skills. But we also need to make sure that companies can find who they need for the occupations of like right now, today. We can't train, and we also can't train a bunch of people who then come out of a program with skills so specific that they can't find a job because it doesn't exist yet. So this is where for students, adaptability and transferable skills matter more than training for just one role. And we need to think about those long-term pathways and ladders, and same for employers. Like we need to be thinking about how do we put people on the pathway to begin, preparing for these future roles, even before those roles really come into fruition. But it's a really tricky balance. So like that timing is really challenging, I think, for employers. We saw just recently there in the federal government, there were EV supports that were going into place. So then our companies were ramping up production of electric vehicles. Well, then that slowed down with the change in administration. And so then we had a bunch of people who maybe were trained specifically for skills that were related to EVs that maybe now can't use those skills because companies have gone maybe back to producing more of those gas powered vehicles. And so it's hard to keep up with for our companies. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing out there.
Yeah, that's a very good point about not being able to keeping up. Because I was just gonna ask, do you think that if we are keeping up, because the technology changes so fast, right? And are we really keeping up with, like, prepare our workforce to catching up with the changes? Sounds like we are not, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult. Business moves really fast and technology is moving even faster, and academia doesn't always move at the same speed as business and as employers. So I think it's advancing so quickly that we're trying that, but I think where what our schools are realizing is that maybe it takes intentional effort on the side of the educational entity to work with employers to truly understand their needs and to reach out to them and say, what are you seeing? What are you going to see in 3 to 5 years? But then again, it's also the role of schools to teach students how to learn so that they are constantly able to reskill as these things continue to change. And I think that's we're leaning into a little bit is like, how do we train people to be good learners? And so that as we continue to see this technology changing the way that the world works, we're prepared for that because we've trained a bunch of people who are adaptable and who have the right skill sets. And so I think we're seeing schools lean into that a little bit more rather than trying to teach these super specific skills that they think companies are going to need. But again, we're not totally sure because things are changing all the time. So we're doing our best, right?
Yes, definitely. And I think you just pointed out the disconnection here. What caused the disconnection? What can we do then specifically from your perspective as an employer or HR professionals? What can we do or how should we build the inclusive or just the overall general the talent strategies that best on the current and future job needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is designing these on-ramps in a way that people with different backgrounds and credentials and life situations can access all of these jobs. We have an issue in Michigan that our labor force participation rate is lower than a lot of the nation, and that means that we aren't connecting people to opportunity. And so if we can do that, if we can crack that nut and we can work with companies to help them understand how to do skills-based hiring well, then we can recognize the skills that people are learning that maybe wasn't in the classroom, but that can be applicable on the job. And so having these kind of multiple on-ramps to ensure that we're providing opportunity to all residents. There's a place for everyone in our workforce, whether it's entry level or really advanced engineering and super specific skills. And so we need to make sure that we're kind of helping all of our residents to access these so that we can keep these people here in our state and keep the companies in our state too. And another thing that we're seeing is that companies are putting practices into place that support different types of lifestyles. And so I think this is a really interesting way for companies to be inclusive and to support different types of workers. So, like thinking about working single parents and how can a manufacturer add like a swing shift that allows workers to do school drop off and school pickup, which doesn't always fall within business hours. And so we've seen some of our employers do things like that and seen our companies do that. And it can boost recruitment of a specific type of group. And that's just a way, and it doesn't cost employers all that much to do something like that, to just rethink how their shifts are designed. And so it's not always that you need to have the best benefits or the best perks in the world, but if you can offer a life structure a work structure that works for people's lives, that can really boost recruitment and show that you're an inclusive employer. So, I mean, there's little strategies like that. And then as the workforce programs and as our schools are designing programs and our colleges are thinking about how to prepare people, it's not just about like the job count that's out there, but the skills and the wages and again, those career pathways. How do we put people on the pathway to prosperity, individual prosperity by ensuring that they have a path to continue to upskill, to continue to relearn and get into a higher and higher role and wage.
I really like that. From what you're saying, you really put people at the front, at the center, and looking up their needs and what they need in life, such work-life balance, not just the benefit, but also kind of provide more access opportunities for them. This
Yeah.
this is great. In 2021, MIT published an article highlights that the future of work is through workforce ecosystems. Workforce ecosystem seems to be the key to organizational sustainability and personal success in the era of rapid social change. So, what do you know about Michigan workforce ecosystem? Can you maybe explain to us what it is and how it is so important for the future of work?
When we're talking about an ecosystem, I think we're referring to the comprehensive set of programs and resources and organizations that essentially will help workers to find and stay working for our companies. Like it's really that simple. It's kind of the whole set of folks that are working to help people find jobs and stay in those jobs. And businesses are kind of the customers of that system. But Michigan is really trying to invest in its residents and its workforce supports to ensure that these people have, personal economic success. We always need more and better tools, but the real key is that both job seekers and companies know how to use the system to their advantage and that the programming is constantly adjusting and being as responsive as possible. So we have this big network of Michigan works agencies, our public workforce boards, community colleges, universities, K-12, proprietary training providers, and community-based organizations. All of those people kind of make up that workforce ecosystem, and they're all playing a little bit of a different role to support different groups within that ecosystem. And we're all working to try and ensure that we have the talent that we need for our economy and people to succeed in the future. We have some of the best in class providers of all kinds. Our Michigan Works agencies are amazing. Our universities, best in class. So the secret is really, like I said, for companies to learn how to effectively navigate this and to maximize that return for their company. Same on the workforce side. If workers or people don't, job seekers don't know about these resources, they do exist to help people get retrained if, they need to be retrained or, there's funding available to support them and paying for a training program and things like that, that will then help them to get into a job. And so all of those pieces kind of make up that system. And then we have, our state agencies that are funding and regulating the system and scaling programs across the system. And then my team, we at DRP, the Detroit Regional Partnership, we're kind of helping to connect all of that to real business investment and growth. And so we're working with companies who are brand new to the region and then trying to help ensure that our workforce programs are responsive to those needs and that these companies that are coming into the market will be able to find the talent that they need long term. So we're part of the system too. So economic development is certainly part of that system as well. So it's a big system. There's a lot of different players and components to it. But, to your point, though, the ecosystem is the mechanism by which people can find these companies and by which the companies can find these people that they need to work for them.
So sounds like we are all in this big ship together. Everybody in there, and then we're all in this together. So it is great that to know that we have this Michigan workforce ecosystem, and you explained it so well how it could all work together to promote a competitive and adaptive workforce for the future economic growth. So, how does the business navigate Southeast Michigan workforce ecosystem? You kind of touched on that. Specifically, what sources are available for employees to build inclusive talent strategies?
There's a lot of great programs here, and it can feel like a lot to manage and understand, and it can feel a little maybe complicated, but it's really worth a company taking the time to properly engage with these systems. Our Michigan Work systems provide recruiting and screening and training dollars and on-the-job training support, and that's all available to companies typically without a lot of cost to the company. Our community colleges and training providers can customize things for our businesses and create new courses or apprenticeships that are very specific to the needs of an employer, kind of that employer-driven training model where an employer can say, hey, here's what I need. These are the very specific skills that I need. Can you help me to find people? And of course, our colleges and universities are, constantly looking at their curriculum as well. And so if I were a business and I didn't know where to start, I honestly might start with my economic development agency within my area, either my county or my township or my local, because they are connected to all of these different types of resources. And so as a company, that's usually a good place to start because they can help to understand your needs and then direct you appropriately within the system. And that's sort of how my team operates as well. And that can really just be helpful because, like I said, there's a lot of programs out there, but recruiting, for example, 500 production workers is very, very different than recruiting 2 to 3 really high level engineers, depending on what that strategy is or depending on what the company is looking for. It might take a different strategy and it might be a connection to a different partner. And we want everyone, if we're talking about businesses as customers of the workforce ecosystem, we want them to have a good experience and be able to navigate effectively to the right programs at the right time for their business. I think an economic development agency can certainly help a business to do that so that they don't feel overwhelmed and that they don't kind of just feel lost in this very large system that has a lot of different components to it.
Well, thank you. From your experience and your perspective, kind of to carry on what you just said, do you see any upcoming challenges that you feel like the most organization they will face as now the AI moving along, the machine learning? And so in terms of creating the talent development and management strategy, can you foresee some kind of challenge they will face and what kind of suggestion you could give to the organizations or employer who are listening to this podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is certainly a big one. And how does it impact workers and work and what does get automated and what doesn't? And one of the things that we say a lot is that AI won't take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will. That's sort of where, it's different for every company and how they're going to change what they're doing with workers accordingly. It can be very profitable to maybe automate some things, but there will always be that human component to it. But really thinking ahead as a company and getting some advice, there's companies out there that'll do this type of consultation with a company and help them to understand how their specific business line could be impacted by AI and machine learning and where they should be looking to how it can help their bottom line, right? And so there's different agencies that consult on that work. And then there's the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center. They do a really great job of helping companies to kind of understand where they're at and where they can go to better serve basically themselves and their profit as companies. And we want to see that as economic development agencies because we want to make sure that our companies are viable and that they keep their doors open and that they continue to hire people and have workers because that's how people make money and stay in our economy to help our economy grow. So it all kind of like works together, but there's definitely ways to try and start working on these things. And I guess I would say like now is the time. You don't want to wait until, there's a big change that happened and you weren't prepared for it. Even if you think that you're thinking about starting a plan, the time is now really to start just trying to think of how all of this will impact your business and how to get out ahead of some of these things before it's too late, really.
Very good point. Thank you so much for your feedback. Building a robust and future-ready talent development management strategy for long-term success certainly has its challenges, as you mentioned, but there are always ways to overcome the challenges and close talent gaps. You don't have to do this alone. I mean, all of us don't have to do this alone. We can just all work together. So a collaborative network, state agencies, education institutions, and private organizations can help to strengthen the alignment between the workforce capabilities and talent strategic needs, close the skill gap, and increase economic opportunity. Well, thank you, Sarah, for being on the podcast. This is really, really helpful. I appreciate your feedback and insight. And that's all for this episode on building inclusive talent strategy based on current and future job needs. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. We will catch you the next time.
Sounds good.